going to next look at relationship communication. And so what we want to do is talk about developing relationships. So if we go back to the stages of development would be contact, involvement, and then intimacy is still developing because there's differing levels of intimacy. So if you're in those stages of contact, involvement, and intimacy, it's important that you do these, let's see, 8 things up on the screen. Now, let's pretend that your relationship's in the deterioration stage. You would also want to do these 8 things in order to get yourself back into the intimacy phase of your relationship. So what are some of the things you can do? Well, the first one is to be nice, and I realize that that is so incredibly vague, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't really know what that means. What that is pro-social behavior. You're polite, cheerful, and friendly. You don't criticize, and you are sacrificial. You don't always make sure your needs are met. You really strive to meet the other person's needs. The next is to communicate. That means you call just to say hi. You send cards and letters. Maybe you send them a message on Facebook. You make sure that you are always talking, and that even when there's conflict, that you respond in a constructive manner. You follow some of the rules that we've talked about this semester. The next is to be open, and that means you self-disclose. You tell things about yourself to the other person so they can get to know you even further. Give assurances. That means that you tell them that you are in love with them, that you comfort them, you put them first, you tell them how significant and important that relationship is to you. Share joint activities just means find some things that you like to do together, whatever that may be. Share activities, sports, going with friends, doing things, just being together and doing something at the same time that you both enjoy. Be positive. Make sure your interactions are pleasant, that they're upbeat, hold hands, do each other favors. Focus on self-improvement. You should not just say, this is who I am. I'm just going to put on sweatpants and a hat and they'll just like me anyways. They should love you anyways, but you should also work on improving yourself. If you gain weight, try and lose weight. If you're doing unhealthy things like smoking and drinking, maybe cut back on those things. If you want your relationship to thrive, you have to be geared and thinking of improving yourself at all times. And last but not least, be empathetic, and you can read more on page 248. And that's just basically really acknowledging the other person's feelings and putting yourself in their shoes. It's not a distant, I feel sorry for you. It's a, I know how I would feel in that situation, and I can really relate to that, and then give you some positive feedback to help them through that difficult time. The next thing that we're going to look at is in deteriorating relationships, and what do some of those patterns look like? Because some people have a hard time identifying what deterioration in a relationship looks like. So these are some red flags that your relationship might be headed for some trouble. The first is going to be withdraw, and that means non-verbally you tend to stay away from each other. There's a decrease in eye contact and touching, and you're just really not in the same space at the same time. And if you are, you're not talking to each other. Decline in self-disclosure. You're telling the other person less about your day, less about your friends, less about the things you're doing, less about your hopes and dreams. There's going to be an increase in deception, and that is people start to tell little white lies, even bigger lies, and they're just starting to kind of show that lying has become a habit for them, and they're unfortunately creating a very difficult climate to then come out of and try to repair. And then positive messages are going to decrease and negative messages increase. So more criticism, less assurances being given. Some of the ways that we disengage, the first thing we do is we say things like, I care for you a lot, but right now I'm just not ready for a serious relationship. So you're a good person. It's not me. It's not you, it's me, is the quintessential positive tone message to preserve a relationship. The justification may be something like giving the person reasons why you're going to break up. So, I'm going away to college, or this long distance isn't working, or we're just different people with different ideas, or anything like that that you justify the breakup. The other thing that we do, again, is we deceive each other, and that obviously leads to disengagement, as we just talked about. And then de-escalation is to reduce the intensity of the relationship. So you avoid them, you don't call them as much, you don't spend as much time together. So those are some of the strategies we can use. One of those is not better than the other. Obviously, the best is going to be the positive tone, but you're going to have some explanation, and you are going to have some de-escalation. Deception is probably the one you want to stay away from, just because that's not good for your own self-esteem. Lying and deceiving others is going to eventually make you feel bad about yourself. You're going to lose that relationship, obviously, but you don't want to damage your self-esteem and then come to think of yourself as that type of person, because it's not healthy for you, not physically, not emotionally. Some things that we can do when we do have a breakup is break the loneliness depression cycle. That means you have to get out and spend some time with friends. You have to do some things that are important to you. Exercising is going to be really important here to avoid depression, because you need some endorphins, and just spending time with friends. Next thing you need to do is take a time out, and that means do not jump into a new relationship. Just take time to figure out who you are. During that time, you can bolster your self-esteem. Think that something went wrong with that relationship. It doesn't mean that I'm terrible at relationships. It doesn't mean that nobody's going to want me. It means that this particular relationship didn't work, and soon I'll have another opportunity to have a better chance at being a positive relational partner. Remove any uncomfortable relationship symbols, so clothing, anything that would remind you of them, CDs, items that they gave you, anything that just makes it hard for you to stay positive and hard for you not to be depressed. And then really, the most important thing is to be mindful of what did you do to contribute to this breakup. There are certain things you did that were not healthy, certain things you did that were mistakes, certain things that you did that contributed to a negative climate in a relationship. So try and figure that out, make sense of it, so you don't repeat those patterns. Again, we don't want you to feel bad about yourself, because we want you to bolster your self-esteem. But if you think about, where did I fail in this? I think that's the best way, because you learn more, and then you can go on to have a successful relationship. Next is the interpersonal repair that we talked about in the stages. There's a fun acronym, and this deals with when you engage in interpersonal repair. So this is with the other person. This is not just internally. So interpersonally, we use the acronym REPAIR, obviously, because that's what stage we're talking about. The R stands for recognize the problem. This is actually more of a intrapersonal step, in that you have to make sense of it first. You have to see it from your point of view and also your partner's point of view, and try to figure out what are the changes that would have to take place if we're going to resolve this. But really, what's at the core of the problem? What are your needs that aren't being met? Next is you're going to engage in productive communication. That means relational messages need to clarify motivations in your needs. What are your needs right now? And you need to use your communication knowledge to construct messages that help that other person understand your needs. You want to exchange perspectives and try to tell your partner that you're trying to see it from their point of view, because that's going to make them feel like you've spent some time. You want to practice positive responses, use I messages, active listening, and remember irreversibility. If you say something, you cannot take it back. So be available to the other person, show them that you want to talk this out. Next is posing possible solutions. We want to come up with win-win solutions. We're kind of projecting forward to chapter 12, but your final paper in this class is a win-win paper, and that means that it's not a compromise. Actually, both people get what they want, and nobody actually has to give up anything. The more solutions you generate, the better, because there's more things to choose from, and then everybody can get the best of both worlds, hopefully. Engage in what we call affirmation of one another, and that means that you need to, again, use some of those cherishing behaviors, and that means a smile, a wink, a squeeze, a kiss, anything like that that's going to make somebody feel better. And you also want to Disclose your feelings. Tell them that you care. Tell them that they're important to you. Tell them that they're a good person. And then that just kind of sets the stage for the hard work to begin. And the hard work is when you have to integrate those solutions that you generated into your normal behavior. And hopefully you don't go back to those unpredictable patterns that you were entrenched in before. Last but not least is you have to risk to repair a relationship. And that's why so many people don't end up getting out of that disintegration phase. That's why so many people get a divorce, because there's no risk. They don't want to be the first one to say they're sorry. They don't want to be the one to change. They want the other person to change first. And so really what we have to do is change our behavior first, even if the other person doesn't change their behavior. And this just leads us into the very next topic, which is the interpersonal repair. Remember punctuation, where we had the flirting and the phoning example way back from chapter 1. The wife was on her phone, the husband was flirting with the waitress, and the wife said that he started flirting, so she was on the phone, and the husband said, no way, she was on the phone, so I started flirting. The point is that if he wouldn't have been flirting, then punctuation can't even happen, because it can't be a he said, she said scenario. He didn't do anything when she got on her phone. Same example pretty much is shown on the bottom of page 253, where you have two people. One person's criticizing, the other person is attacking the criticizer. And what happens there is, even if you're still being criticized and your partner's doing the criticism, you can't stop them from doing that. No matter what you do, they keep doing it. But what you can do is not attack them because of their criticism. You can use communication to say, you know, it makes me feel bad when you're so critical. That's not attacking them. Attacking them is yelling back at them and saying detrimental things that make them feel bad about themselves. So you can be the one to stop the behavior. You can be the one to make the difference, and take the risk to do that. Be the person that walks out on that limb and says, you know what, I want to fix this relationship, and I'm going to be the one that starts the process.